Hey guys, how are you? I hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing a movie review. This movie is a thriller from the UK, English language, released in the year 2007, directed by Gary Love, and this film is called Sugarhouse. So Sugarhouse is set on an estate in London. You've got this upper class man who is venturing into this dangerous territory to buy a gun off a crack addict. Now this crack addict, he's very unreliable. He starts to become obsessed with the money that this upper class guy has, but he's not willing to hand the gun over. So there's a lot of confusion, there's a little bit of bitterness between the two, but this is where they start to realise and learn a little bit about each other's lives. But what this upper class man doesn't know is that this crack addict actually stole this gun from the local crime lord that he knows, and this crime lord holds this gun very dear because it might implicate him in something very bad that's happened in the past. So this crime lord is absolutely furious, and he goes on a hellish rampage in order to track this gun down, which ultimately puts both of these characters in grave danger. So what happens at that point on? Something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Sugarhouse. This isn't the best British sort of crime film. As far as crime films are concerned, there have been some very good ones. You know, for example, you've got Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, you've got Snatch, you know, Guy Ritchie films. I think there's also other films such as Rise of the Foot Soldier. So all these great sort of crime English films have really made a name for themselves. But coming into Sugarhouse, I was expecting something of that quality because of the fact of the cast. The cast was very good. You've got Stephen Macintosh, you've got Ashley Walters, and you've also got Andy Serkis. And I thought that it would be a lot more memorable than it actually is. But having said that, it's still enjoyable. It actually makes you think about different worlds colliding. Basically, this upper class man is venturing into a world that he has no knowledge about. He doesn't know how to cope with this, and he's treating this crack addict as just a crack addict. He's not really associating him with a person because he doesn't really relate to this guy, and that because he deems him as a lower sort of human being, he doesn't really treat him with the respect. But then as the movie goes along, they start to know a little bit more about each other, and it actually is quite touching in some aspects, as this guy, the first impressions that this guy had actually change, and you actually get an indication that some people will base their judgments on what they look like. And ultimately this crack addict, I think he was the best character in the film, is because he starts to translate into someone you could actually care about. You know, the circumstances that he actually faced has shaped him as the person he is, and I actually thought it was very tragic the way that his character actually unfolded. And in reality, you're going through the street, you see a crack addict, you're not really going to give him a second glance, and that is understandable, but ultimately you don't know what that person's gone through, and I think the movie allows you to connect to someone that you wouldn't normally associate with. So I think that was definitely an eye-opening sort of film, and it's that world, the two different worlds clashing, which I thought was very fascinating, because as I said, as the movie goes along, those thin walls between classes, you know, the upper class and the low class, it starts to evaporate, and they start to become one person, and they start to really care about each other, and that was a direction that I didn't think it was going to go. So Stephen Macintosh played the upper class guy with a lot of mysterious quality. You don't know why he wants the gun, but he's desperate to get it, and so you think that he might have something bad going on in his life, and there's a lot of ambiguity into the character of this upper class guy. So Stephen Macintosh, he was also of Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. He's been in a lot of British gangster films, and I thought that his performance, it wasn't as standout as the other two, but he was still a very interesting character. Then, as I said, you've got the crack addict played by Ashley Walters, fantastic character, very sympathetic character, and then you've got another very memorable performance from Hoodwink. Now, Hoodwink is played by Andy Serkis, who is a brilliant actor. You wouldn't associate him with this type of character. He's absolutely psychotic. He's going to fly off at the deep end, but then all of a sudden he has this charming way about him. You know, he's got a wife, the wife is expecting a baby, and the wife is really hell-bent on trying to change Hoodwink, trying to change him, calm him down, because he has a family. So there's a lot of expansion to these characters that you wouldn't initially see in other films of this quality. So it's a very downbeat, dirty feeling that the film has. There is violence, but it is not gratuitous, and it is few and far between. It really is a character study of a horrible situation and the clashes of two sort of social classes. So yeah, the soundtrack was very good. I thought that it just contributed that emotion that it wanted, and the continuity for the most part was fairly decent. It only goes for about 80 minutes, and I thought that it really got to its point, and it really didn't meander along in unwanted material. My only problem with Sugarhouse was, as I said, it doesn't really elevate itself to the more memorable films. It doesn't have the qualities in there that make it worth telling your friends about it. It's just a movie that does run through the motions. Yes, it is decent. It's not great, and that's ultimately what the problem is that if you compare comparing it to films like Rise of the Foot Soldier, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, it just doesn't have that X factor that elevates it to the point of, you know, a movie that really would sell internationally. This is much more of a lower budget sort of feeling, in that it's only going to appeal and it's only going to be seen by a very select few. And after seeing the film, you can really understand why. So that's not a big problem. The director, Gary Love, he really did a good job at creating something a little bit different within the crime sort of genre. I thought that it could have been a little bit more thrilling than it was. Yes, it does keep your attention, and there are moments that are suspenseful, but I just thought there were some moments where it just dragged a little bit. It doesn't really get noticeable, it never gets boring, but I thought it could have upped the ante a little bit to make it just a little bit more thrilling, and maybe it would have given it that X factor that it was looking for. So overall, if you are a fan of British gangster films and crime films, I would highly recommend you check out Sugarhouse. As I said, not a brilliant film, but it was better than I was expecting, and I got a lot more out of it than I first anticipated. So overall, for Sugarhouse, going to give it 3 stars. Go out there and see it. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.